I never thought I'd measure my mornings by the sound of plastic crashing against asphalt. But for the last 3 weeks, like clockwork, that hollow thud was the first thing I'd hear once the garbage truck pulled away. My name's Daniel Hayes, 38 years old, divorced, raising a 9-year-old boy named Luke in a modest suburban neighborhood just outside of Dallas, Texas. I worked from home most days, doing freelance IT contracts. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me time with my son. We lived in a 2-story townhouse with a tiny front lawn and a driveway just wide enough for my Ford F-150. Life was steady, predictable, until Karen moved in across the street. Now, I'd heard the term Karen tossed around online, always attached to videos of entitled women making scenes in grocery stores or yelling at baristas. But I never thought I'd meet one who seemed born for the role. Her real name was Pamela, but no one called her that. Even her license plate frame, bedazzled in rhinestones, read Karen and Proud. She was the newly elected vice president of our HOA, a position she wielded like a sheriff's badge. Every week, she found something new to pick at. My grass was too long at 3 inches. My Christmas lights lingered too late into January. And now, her obsession was my trash bin. It started small. She claimed my bin was too close to the curb, that it blocked her view of the street. Then, when I tucked it further back, she claimed it was an eyesore left out too long after collection day. I tried being polite, even apologetic. But that didn't stop her from marching across the street, pastel cardigan flapping in the breeze, to shove my bin over with both hands like she was toppling a fortress. The first time, I thought maybe it was an accident. But the way she glanced back at me, smirking while I stood frozen on my porch, told me otherwise. "Trash day's over, Daniel," she chirped, brushing her hands like she'd just solved a problem. I clenched my jaw, scooped up the bin, and went inside without a word. Luke was at the kitchen table, chewing on a Pop-Tart while he watched me through the window. "Why'd she do that, Dad?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Don't worry about it, buddy. Just a cranky neighbor." But my son wasn't stupid. He knew a bully when he saw one. By the 3rd week, the sound of that bin slamming to the pavement wasn't just irritating, it was personal. Each time she did it, something inside me twisted tighter, like a spring ready to snap. That morning was no different. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through client emails, when the garbage truck rumbled down the street. I set the mug down, waiting. Sure enough, bang. The bin toppled over, rolling a few feet before stopping against the curb. I walked outside, phone in hand, pretending I wasn't watching. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her nose, lips pursed like she'd just conquered Rome. "You know the rules, Daniel," she said, loud enough for half the block to hear. "Bins have to be put away within 30 minutes of collection. It's in the bylaws." I looked around. Every other neighbor's bin was still out. Some weren't even upright from the truck's grabber arm, tossing them down. "Funny," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Doesn't look like anyone else is rushing to bring theirs in." Her mouth tightened. "Don't get smart with me. I'm just trying to keep this neighborhood looking decent. We don't want property values dropping, do we?" "Right," I muttered. "Wouldn't want that." She sniffed, spun on her heel, and strutted back to her driveway, where her immaculate SUV gleamed in the morning sun. I picked up my bin, but this time, instead of dragging it back behind the fence, I left it standing tall right where it had fallen. A message. A small one, but still a message. That night, when Luke was asleep, I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, staring at the dark outline of Karen's house across the street. Porch light blazing, curtains drawn tight. She wasn't just some nosy neighbor. She was a control freak with a taste for domination. And I was tired of playing defense. The next morning, I woke early. The air was cool, the Texas sun not yet beating down. I walked out front, phone camera ready. I positioned the bin squarely at the edge of the driveway, more visible than ever. Then I went back inside, heart pounding like I was setting a trap. Minutes ticked by. At 8:03, the familiar click of her door echoed across the street. Out she came, hair perfectly sprayed into place, clipboard in hand like she was inspecting a crime scene. She spotted my bin, marched over, and shoved it down with all the force her manicured hands could muster. And I caught the whole thing on video. Her smug little grin, the deliberate shove, the satisfied dusting of her palms, it was all there. My pulse raced as I lowered the phone, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the victim. I had proof. Later that day, I posted the clip on our neighborhood Facebook group. I didn't add commentary, just the raw footage. Within an hour, the comments poured in. Wow, that's uncalled for. She did the same thing to me last month. Classic Karen behavior. She needs to chill. By evening, the video had over 200 views and more than 40 comments. Some defended her, saying she was just enforcing the rules, but most were fed up. Apparently, I wasn't the only target. She'd nitpicked about holiday decorations, lawn gnomes, even kids' bicycles left on sidewalks. Karen must have seen it too, because by dinner time she was on my porch, jabbing her finger at the doorbell. I opened it halfway, blocking her view inside. "You think you're clever, posting that?" she snapped, her face flushed red beneath the heavy makeup. "I think people deserve to see the truth," I said evenly. Her eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Daniel. A big mistake. I sit on the HOA board. We can make life very difficult for you if you don't cooperate." I held her gaze, pulse hammering. For a second, I almost caved. But then I remembered Luke's voice, asking why she knocked it over. The confusion in his eyes. "Then I guess we're already there," I said, and shut the door in her face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted it, but because I knew this wasn't the end. People like Karen didn't back down. They doubled down. And sure enough, the next morning, a bright orange violation notice was taped to my door. Unapproved trash bin placement. Fine, $75. I tore it down, crumpled it in my fist, and stared across the street at her house. Curtains twitched. She wanted a war. Fine, she'd get one. But the next move wouldn't just be about proving a point. No, I was going to build something so undeniable, so untouchable, that even Karen would be left speechless. The violation notice sat crumpled on my counter like a dare I couldn't ignore. Every time I glanced at it, the neon orange seemed to glow brighter, like it was mocking me. I knew one thing. Paying the fine wasn't an option. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because doing so meant she'd won. And if I gave Karen even an inch, she'd stretch it into a mile. I called the HOA office that afternoon, hoping for some kind of rational conversation. A woman named Janet answered, her voice clipped and professional. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, I see the violation here. It was reported by our vice president, Mrs. Pamela Collier." "Reported?" I said, incredulous. "She's the one knocking it over. I sent a video to the neighborhood group. You can see her do it." Janet paused, tapping at her keyboard. "I can't comment on social media postings, sir. If you'd like to file an official complaint, you'll need to submit it in writing to the board." "Which Karen sits on," I muttered. "Mrs. Collier," she corrected. I hung up, rage simmering. There was no appealing to bureaucracy. The board was her playground, and I was the kid she liked to push off the swings. Luke noticed my mood at dinner. He pushed his chicken nuggets around with his fork, watching me. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. You're not going to let her win, right?" That hit me harder than I expected. My son had been through enough with the divorce, shuffling between two houses, trying to make sense of adults who couldn't make things work. The last thing he needed was to see his dad bullied into silence. I leaned across the table, met his eyes. "No, Luke. I'm not." That night, after he went to bed, I pulled out a notebook. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I was going to outthink her. I sketched ideas, scribbled notes, brainstormed everything from legal routes to creative revenge. Most were impractical, but one idea stuck. What if I built a new bin? Not just any bin, but something she couldn't knock over. Something so absurd, so over the top, that the entire neighborhood would talk about it. If she wanted attention, I'd give her a spectacle she couldn't control. The next day, I drove to Home Depot. I walked the aisles like a man on a mission: steel brackets, pressure-treated lumber, concrete mix. I even bought weather-resistant paint in a bold shade of cobalt blue, just to make it impossible to miss. The cashier raised an eyebrow as I piled everything onto the belt. "Building a deck?" I smiled faintly. "Something like that." Over the weekend, I worked nonstop in the driveway. Sawdust flew, drills whirred, hammers pounded. Neighbors slowed their cars as they passed, craning necks to see what I was building. Some even stopped to ask, but I just grinned and told them to wait and see. By Sunday evening, it stood there, a fortress of a trash bin enclosure. The frame was anchored in concrete, the walls reinforced with steel panels. The front door swung open on industrial hinges, with a latch that locked from the inside. And in the center, sitting proudly like a king on his throne, was my city-issued trash bin, unmovable, indestructible, and painted with a giant yellow smiley face. Luke loved it. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off his bike when I unveiled it. "She's gonna hate this, Dad." "That's the point," I said, ruffling his hair. By Monday morning, the neighborhood buzzed with curiosity. People walked their dogs slower than usual, whispering and chuckling as they passed. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who rarely left his porch, shuffled across the street to get a closer look. But the real show came at 8:05, right on schedule. Karen emerged, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking against the driveway. She spotted the enclosure, stopped mid-stride, and froze. Her sunglasses slipped down her nose as she took in the cobalt fortress gleaming in the sunlight. "What in God's name?" she muttered. I leaned against my truck, sipping coffee like it was any other Monday. "Morning, Karen." She marched over, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "What is this thing?" "This," I said casually. "It's my new trash bin enclosure. Keeps the neighborhood tidy. Protects against, people knocking it over." Her face flushed crimson. "This is a violation. It's not approved. It's an eyesore." "Funny," I said, nodding toward the freshly painted smiley face. "I think it brightens the street up." She tried the door, yanking at the latch, but the reinforced hinges didn't budge. She stepped back, flustered, like a magician whose trick had failed. "You can't just build this without HOA approval." I shrugged. "Show me the bylaw that says I can't protect my property. Until then, this bin stays." Neighbors had gathered by then, some openly filming with their phones. A few even clapped quietly. Karen, realizing she had an audience, straightened her cardigan and stormed back across the street. But I knew her. This wasn't over. Sure enough, 2 days later, another violation notice appeared on my door. This time, the fine was $150 for unauthorized exterior modification. I posted it on the Facebook group with a picture of the fortress. The comments exploded. "Unauthorized? It looks amazing. She's just mad she can't push it over anymore." Finally, someone stood up to her. Karen tried to argue in the thread, but every comment she left was met with gifs of smiley faces and laughing emojis. The more she fought, the worse it looked. For a moment, I thought I'd won. But then came Friday night. I was putting Luke to bed when I heard it, a metallic clang from outside. My stomach dropped. I rushed to the window, yanking the blinds. 2 teenage boys were sprinting down the street, laughing. Behind them, the fortress door swung open, dented and cracked. The smiley face paint was smeared with something dark. I ran outside, heart hammering. Someone had vandalized it. Spray paint, crude words, dents in the steel. My masterpiece, my victory, reduced to a joke in minutes. And across the street, Karen stood on her porch, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She didn't have to say a word. I knew she'd orchestrated it. I wanted to scream, to march across the street and demand answers. But Luke's sleepy voice drifted from the upstairs window. "Dad? What happened?" I swallowed hard, forcing calm. "Go to sleep, buddy. I'll take care of it." And as I stood there in the cool night air, staring at the ruined bin, I realized this wasn't just a petty neighborhood feud anymore. Karen had escalated the game, and if she thought I was done fighting, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The next morning, I walked outside to inspect the damage in the daylight. The cobalt paint was scarred, the smiley face defaced with black spray paint that spelled out "loser." The steel panels were dented where someone had kicked them in. It wasn't just vandalism, it was humiliation, staged right in front of the neighborhood. I stood there, hands on my hips, neighbors peeking from behind curtains, some whispering as they passed with their dogs. And then I saw her. Karen, standing on her porch, mug of coffee in hand, robe tied tight, like she was enjoying a show. She caught my eye and raised her cup in a mock salute. That smugness lit a fire in my chest. I wanted to march across the street, call her out, maybe even scream. But deep down, I knew that was exactly what she wanted, to make me lose control in front of everyone. Instead, I turned back toward the wrecked fortress and dragged it into the garage. If she thought breaking it would break me, she had another thing coming. Inside, Luke was at the table, chewing his cereal slowly. He looked up, wide-eyed. Dad, was it her? I hesitated. I don't know, buddy, but I'll find out. He nodded, serious for a 9-year-old. You can't give up. That night, after Luke was asleep, I set up a pair of motion-activated cameras. One pointed at the driveway, the other hidden in the bushes near the curb. I wasn't about to let anyone vandalize my property again without proof. The following days were tense. Every time the garbage truck rolled by, my pulse spiked. I watched Karen like a hawk, waiting for her to slip. But she didn't. Not directly, anyway. Instead, I noticed the whispers around the neighborhood growing louder. She had started making rounds, clipboard in hand, stopping at houses, pointing out violations. Kids' bikes left in driveways. Lawns half an inch too tall. A flagpole without permission. She was stirring the pot, turning neighbors against each other, all while painting me as the troublemaker who was bringing down the community. It worked, at least on some. One evening, my neighbor 2 doors down, a guy named Rick, knocked on my door. Hey man, he said awkwardly, scratching his head. I don't want to get in the middle of this, but could you maybe tone it down? Karen says your trash thing is making the whole block look bad. I laughed bitterly. You believe her? He shrugged. I don't know what to believe. I just don't want drama. My wife's already talking about moving. That stung. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. Karen's antics were poisoning the whole neighborhood. The breaking point came a week later. It was garbage day again, and I'd left my battered fortress bin out as usual, cameras rolling. Around 8:10, Karen strutted out, wearing heels that clicked against the pavement. She stopped in front of my driveway, looked around, then leaned down. And with one sharp kick of her shoe, she slammed the bin onto its side. The cameras caught everything. The smirk on her face, the way she dusted her hands, the triumphant walk back across the street. I pulled the footage that night, uploaded it to the Facebook group, and titled it simply, Caught in the Act. The reaction was immediate. Unbelievable. She's out of control. That's vandalism. You should press charges. Karen tried to defend herself, claiming it was an accident, that she was just straightening it. But the video was too clear. People were done giving her the benefit of the doubt. Even her allies fell silent. For the first time, the tide was turning. But Karen wasn't finished. The very next day, I received a certified letter from the HOA board. An emergency meeting had been scheduled to discuss my pattern of noncompliance and behavior detrimental to community harmony. In other words, they were coming after me officially. I sat at the kitchen table, letter trembling in my hands. This wasn't just fines or petty harassment anymore. They wanted to make an example out of me, maybe even kick me out of the neighborhood. Luke sat across from me, chewing his lip. What are you going to do, Dad? I folded the letter slowly. I'm going to fight back. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Neighbors filled every chair, some standing in the back, phones ready to record. Karen sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck, her expression smug. She looked like a queen waiting to pass judgment. The president of the HOA, an older man named Bill, cleared his throat. Tonight's agenda is the matter of Mr. Daniel Hayes and his ongoing violations. Karen leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. Daniel has repeatedly ignored HOA bylaws, built unauthorized structures, and created a hostile environment. His behavior is unbecoming of this community, and I move that we issue maximum fines and pursue legal remedies if necessary. Murmurs rippled through the room. I stood slowly, pulling my phone from my pocket. My palms were sweaty, but my voice was steady. With all due respect, Bill, I think the community deserves to see the truth before any vote is taken. I tapped the screen, and the footage of Karen kicking over my bin played on the clubhouse TV, projected for everyone to see. Gasps echoed through the room. Karen's face went pale, her hand flying to her pearls. This is taken out of context, she stammered. But it was too late. The room erupted. Enough's enough. She's been harassing all of us. Kick her off the board. Bill slammed the gavel, trying to restore order. His eyes, though, were locked on Karen, and I could see it. He was done protecting her. That was the moment I realized I'd won the crowd. For weeks, she'd pushed me, humiliated me, tried to break me down. But now the truth was undeniable, and everyone saw it. Karen sat there, trembling with rage, as the voices around her grew louder, calling for her resignation. And I knew this was the climax. The room pulsed with voices, anger bouncing off the clubhouse walls. For years, Karen had lorded over everyone, wielding her clipboard and faux authority like a weapon. But now, she looked small, cornered. Bill, the HOA president, cleared his throat. "All right, folks, let's calm down." He glanced at Karen, then back at the crowd. "This footage is troubling. Karen, do you have an explanation?" Her lips trembled, but her eyes were still sharp. "I was simply trying to maintain order. That trash monstrosity was a blight. And a woman in the back cut her off. "You've been harassing us for years. You fined me for planting tomatoes." Another voice shouted. "She made me tear down my kid's treehouse." The dam had broken. Every pent-up grievance came spilling out, a tidal wave of resentment crashing down on Karen. Her carefully crafted empire was crumbling in real time, and she knew it. Bill raised the gavel again, pounding it for silence. "Enough. We'll handle this formally." He turned to me. "Daniel, the board acknowledges your evidence. The vote tonight is not about you. It's about whether Karen has violated her duties as an HOA officer." The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Karen's head whipped toward him. "What? You can't." "Yes, we can," Bill said firmly. "The bylaws are clear." The vote was called. Hands shot up across the room. One after another, neighbors who had once cowered under her gaze raised their arms high, their faces set with determination. The count wasn't even close. "Motion carried," Bill declared. "Effective immediately, Karen is removed from the HOA board." The room erupted in applause, some neighbors cheering, others hugging. I just stood there, stunned, my phone still in hand. Karen's face was crimson, her chest heaving. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. "You'll regret this," she hissed, pointing at me like a curse. "All of you will regret this." She stormed out, her heels stabbing the floor with each furious step. The heavy door slammed behind her, leaving an almost eerie silence in her wake. I exhaled slowly, a weight lifting off my shoulders. For weeks, I'd lived under her shadow, my every move scrutinized, my patience tested. And now she was gone. The neighbors gathered around me, clapping my back, shaking my hand. Even Rick, the guy who'd asked me to tone it down, grinned sheepishly. "Guess you were right all along, man. Sorry I doubted you." "Don't worry about it," I said with a tired smile. I almost doubted myself, too. That night, back at home, Luke ran into my arms the second I walked through the door. "Did you win?" he asked breathlessly. I knelt down, hugging him tight. "Yeah, buddy. We won." For the first time in weeks, he smiled, really smiled. The weeks that followed were quiet. The neighborhood seemed lighter, friendlier. People waved more, stopped to chat. It was like everyone had been holding their breath under Karen's rule, and now they could finally breathe again. I rebuilt the fortress bin, this time stronger, sleeker. But now it wasn't just about defiance. It had become a symbol. Neighbors even started decorating theirs, adding small flourishes, painting them bright colors. What Karen once saw as a blight had turned into a kind of community rebellion, a reminder that we didn't have to live under fear. One Saturday morning, as I was adjusting the new steel latch, Luke came bounding out with a paintbrush. "Can I add something?" I handed him the brush, and he carefully painted a small star on the side. "For us," he said proudly. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, for us. But Karen wasn't entirely gone. I'd catch glimpses of her sometimes, her curtains twitching as she spied from her window, or her car slowly rolling past like a predator circling prey. She'd lost the board, but her hatred for me hadn't dimmed. One afternoon, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. No signature, but the handwriting was sharp, familiar. "This isn't over." For a moment, my stomach twisted. The old anxiety threatened to creep back. But then I looked up, saw my fortress bin gleaming in the sunlight, saw Luke playing with the neighbor kids in the yard, laughing freely. And I realized something. Karen might still lurk in the shadows, but she no longer held power over me or anyone else. Her reign of terror had ended the moment we all stood up together. As I crumpled the note and tossed it into the bin, I felt an unexpected calm. She could plot, she could glare, she could even try again. But whatever came next, I'd be ready. Because sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't fire or fury. It's resilience. And the look on her face that night, the shock, the fury, the way her kingdom collapsed around her, would stay with me forever. That was the moment she was truly left speechless. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.